Well, Margaret, I don't agree that all these immigrants or all these refugees have been properly vetted. In fact, we know that there are cases of people who allegedly were properly vetted and then were literally planning terrorist attacks on our country. That happened during the campaign, if you may remember. So clearly not all of these foreign nationals have been properly vetted.
But there are 30,000 people in the pipeline, Afghan refugees.
But my primary concern as the vice president, Margaret, is to look after the American people. And now that we know that we have vetting problems with a lot of these refugee programs, we absolutely cannot unleash thousands of unvetted people into our country.
These people are vetted. Good. These people are vetted.
Just like the guy who planned a terrorist attack in Oklahoma a few months ago, he was allegedly properly vetted, and many people in the media and the Democratic Party said that he was properly vetted. Clearly he wasn't. I don't want my children to share a neighborhood with people who are not properly vetted. And because I don't want it for my kids, I'm not going to force any other American citizens' kids to do that either.
No, and that was a very particular case. It wasn't clear if he was radicalized when he got here or while he was living here.
I don't really care, Margaret. I don't want that person in my country, and I think most Americans agree with me.
We'll be back in 1 minute.
All right, guys, so I got to tell you, I am very, very, very impressed by Secretary of State Marco Rubio. Now, a lot of people at the time in which Marco Rubio was picked to be Secretary of State, a lot of people didn't like this pick because, you know, people were saying that he's a neocon, in which, you know, hey, I mean, that is the correct assessment based off his past history. But at the time I said, well, you know, here's the thing. Marco Rubio is going to be under the control of President Trump, okay? And whatever President Trump's foreign policy is, that is what Marco Rubio will be pushing, right? That is what he will be supporting, okay? And I also said that because Marco Rubio and President Trump have a history in which Marco Rubio used to be against President Trump back in 2015 and 2016 during the GOP primary, he knows what it's like to be an enemy of the president. And because of that, that is what makes Marco Rubio probably one of President Trump's best allies, okay? Because he knows what it's like to cross the president. So therefore, he's not going to betray the president. Same thing with J.D. Vance, right? That is what makes J.D. Vance such a great bulldog as well, too, is the fact that he used to be enemies with the president, right? And when you lose that battle in the way that, you know, J.D. Vance and Marco Rubio did, then that creates loyalty, right? And again, I think that's what you're saying, right? That's what you're saying here from J.D. Vance and Marco Rubio. And again, that's why they are so good on TV. And this is why they're so good at their jobs and what they're doing thus far. It's because they used to be enemies of President Trump. So with that being said, again, Marco Rubio is going to give a masterclass here, okay, in this conversation with Margaret Brennan on CBS, as she's going to ask him about multiple topics. And everything that came out of Marco Rubio's mouth during this interview was just perfect. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into this.
As we come on the air, U.S. forces are in the midst of President Trump's most significant military campaign thus far in his second term. Let's get straight to it this morning with Secretary of State Marco Rubio, who joins us from Miami, Florida. Mr. Secretary, for our audience, just to explain, this Red Sea area is a really important transit point for global shipping. The Houthis out of Yemen have been disrupting transit there for some time. President Trump cited these concerns when he announced the strikes. I'm wondering, how long will this campaign last, and will it involve ground forces?
Well, first of all, the problem here is that this is a very important shipping lane, and in the last year and a half, the last 18 months, the Houthis have struck or attacked 174 naval vessels of the United States, attacking the U.S. Navy directly 174 times, and 145 times they've attacked commercial shipping. So we basically have a band of pirates, you know, with guided precision anti-ship weaponry, and exacting a toll system in one of the most important shipping lanes in the world. That's just not sustainable. We are not going to have these people controlling which ships can go through and which ones cannot. And so your question is, how long will this go on? It will go on until they no longer have the capability to do that.
Well, what does U.S. intelligence tell us at this point? Because the U.S. had been conducting strikes for some time, but has not stopped the Houthis. So what's going to be different right now? Do you have more fidelity in the intelligence that would make this more successful?
Well, those strikes were retaliation strikes. So they launched one missile, we hit the missile launcher, or we sent something to do it. This is not a message. This is not a one-off. This is an effort to deny them the ability to continue to constrict and control shipping. And it's just not going to happen. We're not going to have these guys, these people with weapons able to tell us where our ships can go, where the ships of all the world can go, by the way. It's not just the U.S. We're doing the world a favor.
Yeah.
We're doing the entire world a favor by getting rid of these guys and their ability to strike global shipping. That's the mission here, and it will continue until that's carried out. That never happened before. The Biden administration didn't do that. All the Biden administration would do is they would respond to an attack. These guys would launch one rocket, we'd hit the rocket launcher. That's it. This is an effort to take away their ability to control global shipping in that part of the world. That's just not going to happen anymore.
And it could
this will continue until that's finished.
It could involve ground raids?
Well, those are military decisions to be made, but I've heard no talk of ground raids. I don't think there's a necessity for it right now. I can tell you that as of last night, some of the key people involved in those missile launches are no longer with us. And I can tell you that some of the facilities that they used are no longer existing. And that will continue. Look, it's bottom line, easy way to understand it, okay? These guys are able to control what ships can go through there. They've attacked the U.S. Navy 174 times.
Yeah.
They've attacked the United States Navy. We're not going to have people sitting around with the missiles attacking the U.S. Navy. It's not going to happen, not under President Trump.
The president also referenced Iran in his statement. Iran provides some support for the Houthis, as you know. Put this in context for me, because U.S. intelligence has been suggesting for some time that Israel has the desire and intent to conduct an attack on Iran's developing nuclear program in the coming months. President Trump has extended an offer for negotiations. Have you heard anything back from Iran? Is this strike in Yemen a signal to Iran?
This strike in Yemen is about their ability, the ability of the Houthis to strike global shipping and attack the U.S. Navy, and their willingness to do it. 174 times against the U.S. Navy, 145 sometimes against global shipping. That's what the strike is about. What we can't ignore, and the reason why the president mentioned Iran, is because the Iranians have supported the Houthis. They've provided them intelligence, they've provided them guidance, they've provided them weaponry. I mean, there's no way the Houthis, the Houthis would have the ability to do this kind of thing unless they had support from Iran. And so this was a message to Iran. Don't keep supporting them, because then you will also be responsible for what they are doing in attacking Navy ships, in attacking global shipping.
They also,
You know what I love about this? Is the fact that Marco Rubio is being very straight up in regards to why the United States is attacking, striking the Houthis, right? He's not telling us is because, oh, we're trying to protect democracy, right? We're fighting for freedom. Okay, that's not what he's saying. He being straight up. He's just saying, well, listen, they're messing with our money, right? First and foremost, they keep attacking us, okay, at sea. And we have to protect these global shipping lanes for obvious reasons, okay, because commerce is important, okay, is important to the American economy, okay? If we can't get goods and services here, if there are supply chain disruptions because of these terrorist pirates, then that's an issue, right? That is a security threat to the United States of America, right? And again, these are the type of arguments that I want to hear from our elected leaders when you're talking about justifying military action, right? Don't go and fight some other country and tell me you're doing it because you want to fight for democracy, okay, or freedom, or, you know, all this other stuff, right? I don't want to hear that, because that's never the reason, okay? We don't fight for that reason. We fight to open up markets. We fight for natural resources. We fight for geopolitical, strategic purposes, right? We don't fight for all these things that the neocons and the neoliberals have told us for the past, 50, 60 years, okay? We don't fight for these things. What we actually really fight for, again, is commerce. So when you talk about that, right, again, what I like here about what Marco Rubio is saying is that he's being straight up. He's saying, yeah, we can't have pirates basically charging a toll for ships to come through the Suez Canal, right, to have products shipped around the globe. Like, we can't have that, right? So this is why we are striking. This is why we're responding. Now, you know, some people may believe that, hey, this is going to escalate us into a war with Iran. At least I'm hoping that doesn't happen. But regardless, we may see some changes when it comes to Iran, especially if the Eastern Europe foreign policy decisions go the way that it appears like it's going to go, right? It seems as if we're going to have a friendlier relationship with Russia. And a friendlier relationship with Russia means that we're probably going to have to reevaluate some things with Iran as well, too, because Iran and Russia are pretty close. So we'll see, okay, how this war in Ukraine unfolds and how our relationship with Russia develops and what that means for Iran going into the future. But when it comes to these strikes on the Houthis, if what Marco Rubio say is true, which I have no reason not to believe him, then yeah, I think it's justified, right? Yeah, we got to protect commerce, okay? We got to protect the ability of our ships to do business, okay? Because again, this is in the economic interest of this country. And again, what I appreciate about this is that Marco Rubio is not lying about why he's doing it, right? They're telling the truth, and they're saying, well, yeah, it's for commerce and economic reasons. And yeah, I mean, just don't lie to me about it. Let me decide whether or not I think this is justified, okay?
Also get support from Russia potentially, which you leverage sanctions in regard to. But I want to ask you about tariffs, because you were just in Canada this past week. China is Canada's second biggest export market, Mexico's third. In this ongoing trade back and forth the U.S. is having, isn't there a risk that China will ultimately be the winner? If it's too costly to deal with the United States, won't they benefit?
Well, actually, China and Canada are involved in a mini trade war right now. In fact, the Chinese have imposed a bunch of tariffs, reciprocal or retaliatory tariffs on Canada after Canada imposed tariffs on them. So here's the way everyone...
Notice how the liberal media is not complaining about that, right? China slapped tariffs on Canada after Trump did, right? The liberal media has nothing to say about it. They're not boohoo whining crying about Canada having to deal with China, right? They're not coming out here and condemning China for the tariffs. They're not worried about it. It seems as if the only tariffs that are bad for Canada are the ones that are imposed on Canada by Trump. But when, China imposes tariffs on Canada, oh, well, that's not really newsworthy. Let's not boohoo whine and cry about that. Amazing.
Needs to understand this, okay? The president rightfully believes that the balance of global trade is completely off kilter. For 30 or 40 years, we have allowed countries to treat us unfairly in global trade, much of it during the Cold War because we wanted them to be rich and prosperous because they were our allies in the Cold War. But now that has to change. You look at the European Union. The European Union's economy is about the same size as ours. It's not a low-wage economy. It's very comparable to ours in terms of its composition and so forth. Why do they have a trade surplus with us? So what the president is saying is two things. Number one, there are critical industries like aluminum, like steel, like semiconductors, like automobile manufacturing that he rightfully believes, President Trump rightfully believes the U.S. needs to have a domestic capability. And the way you protect those industries and build that capability is by ensuring that there's economic incentives to produce in the United States. The second is global, and that is we are going to put tariffs on countries reciprocal to what they impose on us. And so this is a global. It's not against Canada. It's not against Mexico. It's not against the EU. It's everybody. And then from that new baseline of fairness and reciprocity, we will engage potentially in bilateral negotiations with countries around the world on new trade arrangements that make sense for both sides. Fairness. But right now it's not fair. We're going to reset the baseline, and then we can enter into these bilateral agreements potentially with countries so that our trade is fair. What's not going to continue is, of course, these countries
So this is all just about leverage to get bilateral, not North American free trade deals renegotiation.
No, it's not leverage. It's fairness. It's resetting baseline fairness, and then from there we can work on deals and so forth, because they'll have products we don't make, we have products they don't make. That's where trade works the best. It has to be free, but it has to be fair. And right now it's only free on one side, and it's not fair for the other side.
Well, it's an
unsustainable position.
The ad hoc nature of these policy announcements and pullbacks are causing concern in the marketplace, as we saw this past week. So I heard you describe what seemed like a strategy to get to negotiations on a bilateral front. You also seem to you say this was national security minded, but then we also see comments by the president of like 200% tariffs on champagne. That's not a critical industry for the United States. That seems more emotional.
No, that's called retaliation. That's what happens in these trade exchanges. They're going to increase tariffs on. They already have high tariffs. They're going to add more to their tariffs. Fine. Then we'll have to find something to. I mean, you tell me. I mean, Canada's going after whiskey and orange juice and
in retaliation.
Yeah, exactly. So that sounds pretty petty to me as well. So what's the difference? The point is, I get it. I understand why these countries don't like it, because the status quo of trade is good for them. It benefits them. They like the status quo. We don't like the status quo. We are going to set a new status quo, and then we can negotiate something, if they want to, that is fair for both sides. But what we have now cannot continue. We have deindustrialized this country. Okay, deindustrialize the United States of America. There are things we can no longer make, and we have to be able to make in order to be safe as a country and in order to have jobs. That's why we had a Rust Belt. That's why we've suffered all these important jobs that once sustained entire communities, wiped out by trade, that basically sent these factories, these jobs, this industrial capability to other places. That cannot and will not continue. President Trump, this is no mystery. He's been talking about this since the 1980s, actually, even before he was a political figure. This is going to happen, and it's going to happen now.
Yeah, and again, the difference here, since the so-called journalists ask, okay, the propagandists asked this question, well, it's Trump, right? That's the difference, okay? When other countries slap tariffs on us, oh, well, that's all fine and good, right? Because we're the United States, and we should just take that, right? We shouldn't just allow our companies to be competitive in other countries, but we should allow other countries and their companies to be competitive here in the United States and to freely sell into the United States. I'm just saying, I personally think that a lot of these anchors here just seem to be rooting against America, okay? Clearly what they're trying to do is that they're trying to renegotiate the trade agreements in order to help free up markets for American companies, right? That's essentially what this is about, right? That's what it's about. And she continues to ask these stupid questions like, oh, well, what about the 200% tariff on champagne? And Marco Rubio just told his woman that, yeah, we're doing reciprocal tariffs, okay? If you tariff us, we're going to tariff you. And if you don't want us to tariff you, then take your tariffs off, which will help U.S. companies sell in other foreign markets. I don't understand what is so bad about this, right? What is so controversial about wanting the United States to have better trade deals, okay? To open up foreign markets for American companies, which will help stimulate job growth here in America. What's wrong with that? I'm trying to figure it out. I think you should at least give a man some time to figure it out, and let's see what happens. Let's see how the trade agreements are renegotiated and go from there, okay? Which is what Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent has been saying. This is what Marco Rubio is saying. That's basically what everybody's been saying, that, hey, we just want better trade deals, okay? And also on top of that, we want to protect the industries that are vital, okay, to our national security here in the United States of America, okay? Because, hey, you know, for the longest time, we've said, you know what, we'll give you dollars, you give us stuff, right? And, you know, hey, that has been justified in regards to our trade policy because we're receiving stuff and the other countries are, you know, they're receiving our paper, right? And that has also allowed us to run large deficits because the world is so dependent on the dollar, which, you know, I think could or could not be something that changes in the future. Who knows? But I'm just saying, regardless, there is a need for us to produce things here in the United States of America that are essential to national security, like steel, aluminum, semiconductors, things of that nature. And I think protecting those industries, even if it's not the best thing for our overall GDP growth, it just makes sense, right? It makes sense in case we're in some type of war and we don't want to be dependent on our enemies for critical goods and materials that we need in order to survive and to fight a war, right? That's the last thing that we want. So, you know, I think a lot of what President Trump is doing, it might not make sense to the media, and they're raging about it because they don't like the short-term volatility that is associated with the tariffs in the stock market. But in the long run, it makes sense for the national security interests of the United States of America and also for American businesses going into the future where, again, we can make stuff, right, and sell it to other countries, okay? And, you know, I think that's the direction that the president wants to go in, right? He wants to make things here in America. Let's make stuff here in America, okay? Let's do that. I don't know why this is such a controversial stance to take. I really don't.
I want to ask you about Russia. You said Envoy Steve Witkoff's meeting with Vladimir Putin that happened last week would answer the fundamental question of whether we're moving towards a ceasefire or whether Putin is using a delay tactic. You spoke with Sergei Lavrov, the foreign minister, yesterday. Is this a delay tactic?
Well, I think that was a promising meeting. As I've said repeatedly, we're not going to negotiate this in the public. Hopefully we'll have something to announce at some point fairly soon. I can't guarantee that. But I certainly think the meeting was promising. The exchange was promising. I don't take away from Steve's meeting, from Ambassador Witkoff's meeting, negativity. There are some challenges. This is a complex 3-year war that's been ongoing along a very long military front with a lot of complexity to it. So no one's claiming that it's easy. But I want everyone to understand, here's the plan. Plan A is get the shooting to stop. so that we can move to plan B, phase 2, which is have everybody at a table, maybe with some shuttle diplomacy, to figure out a way to permanently end this war in a way that's enduring and it respects everybody's needs and so forth. No one is saying that that second part is easy, but we can't get even to that second part until we get past the first part. It's hard to negotiate an enduring end to a war as long as they're shooting at each other. And so the president wants a ceasefire, and that's what we're working on. Assuming we can get that done, and that won't be easy in and of itself, we move to the second phase, which is negotiating something more enduring and permanent. That will be hard. It will involve a lot of hard work, concessions from both sides, but it has to happen. This war cannot continue. The president has been clear about that, and he's doing everything he can to bring it to an end.
Okay. We'll talk about that later in the program as well with Envoy Witkoff. I want to ask you about a decision you made to revoke a student visa for someone at Columbia University this past week. The Wall Street Journal editorial board writes, the administration needs to be careful. It's targeting real promoters of terrorism, not breaking the great promise of a green card by deporting anyone with controversial political views. Can you substantiate any form of material support for terrorism, specifically to Hamas, from this Columbia student, or was it simply that he was espousing a controversial political point of view?
Well, not just the student. We're going to do more. In fact, every day now we're approving visa revocations, and if that visa led to a green card, the green card process as well. And here's why. It's very simple. When you apply to enter the United States and you get a visa, you are a guest. And you're coming as a student, you're coming as a tourist, or what have you. And in it, you have to make certain assertions. And if you tell us when you apply for a visa, I'm coming to the U.S. to participate in pro-Hamas events, that runs counter to the foreign policy interest of the United States of America. It's that simple. So you lied. You came. If you had told us that you were going to do that, we never would have given you the visa. Now you're here. Now you do it. So you lied to us. You're out. It's that simple.
But
it's that straightforward.
Is there any evidence of a link to terrorism, or is it just his point of view?
Yeah, they take over. I mean, you should watch the news. These guys take over entire buildings.
They
vandalize colleges.
Intensely.
They shut down colleges.
I'm asking about the specific justification for the revocation of his visa. Was there any evidence of material support for terrorism?
Was the negotiator negotiating on behalf of people that took over a campus, that vandalized buildings? Negotiating over what? That's a crime in and of itself, that they're involved in being the negotiator, the spokesperson, this, that, the other. We don't want it. We don't need these people in our country. We never should have allowed them in the first place. If he had told us, I'm going over there, and I'm going over there to become the spokesperson and one of the leaders of a movement that's going to turn one of your allegedly elite colleges upside down, people can't even go to school, library buildings being vandalized, we never would have let him in. We never would have let him in to begin with. And
hey, Marco Rubio got a point. Low key, he got a point. Again, I'll be the first person to say, I'm not a fan of the Trump administration bending over backwards for Israel. Okay, let me put that out there first and foremost. Okay, but in the case of this individual, right? If I personally go to live in a foreign country, right, and I'm not a citizen there, the last thing that I'm going to be doing is participating in any type of political protest, right? In fact, I'm probably not going to be involved in any political activity at all unless I'm a citizen with substantial business interests that basically motivate me to participate in politics. But even then, again, it would have to be something that I feel like is of a pertinent financial interest, right? So, again, imagine an American going to somebody else's country, okay, and they're there on a visa, and they participate in some type of political protest that results in violence and chaos, right? Regardless of whether or not you were directly or indirectly involved. Like, for example, if you did that in China, right, what do you think the outcome would be? Probably wouldn't be good, okay? I'm not saying right or wrong, whether you agree or disagree with this guy being deported. His participation probably was not a good idea, right? And, you know, it is what it is. You know, it's one of those things where it's just kind of like, you know, I mean, it's a privilege to be here. It's just not something that I would have done. Okay, if I was a student in some other country, the last thing that I would be doing is getting involved in politics, and, you know, been involved in, you know, these movements that, you know, get violent, right? That's the last thing I would do. And, you know, hey, this is what has happened as a result.
Now that he's doing it and he's here, he's going to leave, and so are others, and we're going to keep doing it. And by the way, I find it ironic that a lot of these people out there defending the First Amendment speech, alleged free speech rights of these Hamas sympathizers, they had no problem, pressuring social media to censor American political speech. So I think it's ironic and hypocritical. But the bottom line is this. If you are in this country to promote Hamas, to promote terrorist organizations, to participate in vandalism, to participate in acts of rebellion and riots on campus, we never would have let you in if we had known that. And now that we know it, you're going to leave. Is it only
pro-Palestinian people who are going to have their visas revoked, or are other points of view as well?
No, I think anybody who's here in favor. Look, we want to get rid of Tren de Aragua gang members. They're terrorists too. The president designated them, asked me to designate, and I did, as a terrorist organization. We want to get rid of them as well. We don't want terrorists in America. I don't know how hard that is to understand. We don't want people in our country that are going to be committing crimes and undermining our national security or the public safety. It's that simple. Especially people that are here as guests. That is what a visa is. I don't know where we've gotten it in our head that a visa is some sort of birthright. It is not. It is a visitor into our country. And if you violate the terms of your visitation, you are going to leave. Okay. Secretary Rubio, I'd like to have you back, talk to you about a lot more on your plate another time, but we have.
Wow, that was amazing. Absolutely amazing. But hey, I mean, the dude makes some strong arguments, to be honest with you. There's nothing that he said I can really refute passionately. Okay. Ultimately, at the end of the day, we have people who come into this country on visas. They are guests. And yeah, I mean, the left, of course, they want illegal immigrants to come into the country. They think that illegal immigrants have a right to be here. So, of course, they're going to be super mad, about a guy on a visa getting deported for, allegedly inciting riots, that resulted in violence and chaos. So, yeah, of course, they're going to be mad about that, too. But, I'm just saying this is not something that I would have done, as a foreigner in any other country. And if it was done in any other country, I think the consequences would have been worse than just being deported. So I don't know. I'm just saying that Marco Rubio did a great job in this interview. But let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share a Black conservative perspective. Peace.